The book of Exodus, the second book of the Bible, picks up where Genesis ends. Abraham's grandson, Jacob, and his family of 70 moved to Egypt, thanks to Jacob's son, Joseph, who had risen to second in command under Pharaoh and saved them during a famine. For a deeper understanding, be sure to watch our video on this story, link in the description. Egypt became a haven for them, but after Jacob, Joseph, and his brothers passed away, 400 years passed, and the Israelites multiplied greatly. This blessing, echoing God's promise in the Garden of Eden, sets the stage for the Exodus, Israel's liberation from Egypt. However, a new Pharaoh rises to power, viewing the growing Israelites as a threat. Instead of seeing them as a blessing, Pharaoh enslaves them and orders the murder of all newborn Israelite boys, casting Egypt as a new Babylon. Yet, God begins to turn this evil on its head. An Israelite mother saves her baby by placing him in a basket in the Nile, where Pharaoh's daughter finds and raises him. This child, Moses, will become the deliverer of God's people. Years later, God appears to Moses in the burning bush, calling him to confront Pharaoh and demand the release of the Israelites. God warns that Pharaoh will resist, and he will respond with plagues. The confrontation between God and Pharaoh begins. At first, Pharaoh hardens his own heart, stubbornly refusing to release the Israelites. God sends the first 5 plagues, each targeting Egyptian gods and Pharaoh's defiance. After each plague, Pharaoh refuses to humble himself. Eventually, Pharaoh's pride reaches a point of no return, and God hardens his heart further, using his rebellion to fulfill his redemptive purposes. The final plague is the most devastating, the death of every firstborn in Egypt, but God provides a way of escape for the Israelites. On the night of Passover, they sacrifice spotless lambs and mark their doorposts with its blood. When the plague comes, the blood spares their households. This moment is commemorated annually in the Passover ritual, a symbol of God's justice and mercy. Pharaoh, broken by the loss of his own son, finally lets the Israelites go. But soon after, he changes his mind, pursuing them with his army. At the Red Sea, God parts the waters, allowing the Israelites to cross safely, while Pharaoh and his army are swallowed by the sea. This miraculous deliverance leads to the Song of the Sea, the first hymn of praise in the Bible, declaring, "The Lord reigns as King." It celebrates God's mission to confront evil, redeem his people, and bring them into the Promised Land. However, the story takes a turn. In the wilderness, the Israelites begin to grumble, longing for the comforts of Egypt despite their deliverance. God graciously provides food and water, but their complaints raise a troubling question. Is Israel's heart as hard as Pharaoh's? As Moses leads Israel to the foot of Mount Sinai, where God invites the nation of Israel to enter into a covenant relationship. Here, we reach another key moment in the biblical storyline, because this is picking up and developing God's promise to Abraham. Remember from the book of Genesis, God promised that through Abraham's family, he would somehow restore his blessing to all the nations. And here, we find out more. God says that if Israel obeys the terms of the covenant, they will be so shaped by God's laws, teaching, and justice that they will become a kingdom of priests, God's representatives to show all the other nations what God is truly like. The people of Israel eagerly accept the offer, and God's presence appears on the top of Mount Sinai in the form of clouds, lightning, and thunder. Moses goes up as their representative, and God opens with the basic terms of the covenant, the famous 10 Commandments. These are the foundational guidelines for how the Israelites and God are to relate to one another. After this, a further collection of commands is given to expand on the 10 Commandments in more detail. These laws cover Israel's worship, social justice, and how they are to live as a community. These teachings are meant to shape Israel into a nation of justice and generosity that stands apart from others. Moses writes down all these laws and brings them to the people, who again eagerly agree to enter into the covenant with God. Once they do so, God takes the relationship another step forward. He tells Moses that he wants his holy, divine presence to dwell right in the midst of Israel. This develops another aspect of God's covenant promises. Remember, after humanity's rebellion in the Garden of Eden, access to God's presence was lost. But now, through the family of Abraham, God's presence is becoming accessible once again through this covenant relationship, first to Israel and, one day, to all nations. What follows are 7 chapters of detailed architectural blueprints for a sacred tent called the tabernacle. There is an outer courtyard with an altar, and at the center is a tent divided into an outer room and an inner room. Inside the inner room, called the Most Holy Place, is a golden box called the Ark of the Covenant, covered by angelic figures. This is the hotspot of God's presence. Every piece of the tabernacle has symbolic value. The flowers, angels, gold, and jewels echo back to the Garden of Eden, the place where God and humanity lived together in intimacy. The tabernacle is essentially a portable Eden, a space where God and Israel can dwell together in peace, or at least, in theory. While Moses is on the mountain receiving the blueprint for the tabernacle, something goes horribly wrong. Down at the camp, the Israelites grow impatient. They ask Aaron, Moses' brother, to make a golden calf idol, declaring it the God that brought them out of Egypt. Despite God's visible presence on the mountain, the Israelites break the first 2 commandments of the covenant: no other gods and no idols. God sees what is happening and invites Moses into his anger and grief. He tells Moses that he plans to destroy Israel and start over. But Moses intercedes, appealing to God's character and promises. He reminds God that destroying Israel would break his covenant with Abraham. Moses also points out how the nations would view God's reputation if he destroyed his own people. In response, God relents. He does judge those who led the rebellion, but forgives the nation as a whole and renews the covenant. At this critical point in the story, God reveals his character to Moses for the first time. He says, "The Lord is merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness." He forgives sin, but will not leave the guilty unpunished. Here we see the tension in God's nature. He is full of mercy, but must confront evil to remain good. Above all, God is faithful to his promises, even though he knows he is committing himself to a people who are utterly unfaithful. After renewing the covenant, God commissions Moses to build the tabernacle. The narrative provides 5 chapters detailing its construction, and everything is completed in the final chapter. When the tabernacle is finished, God's glorious presence descends and hovers over the tent, and hope is restored. Moses approaches to enter the tabernacle, but he can't. He's unable to go in. This surprising ending highlights how much Israel's sin has damaged their relationship with God. The book opened with Pharaoh's evil, threatening God's covenant promise to Israel. But by the end, Israel has become its own worst enemy. Their sin now threatens the future of the covenant. The question, as the book closes, is this: how will God reconcile his holiness and goodness with the sinful corruption of his covenant people? The answer lies in the next book. For now, this is the book of Exodus. Join us in the next video as we dive into Leviticus, where God provides a way for his people to live in his holy presence, and the beginning of Genesis, where it all started. Don't miss it. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and share this video to help others explore the Bible with us. God bless you.